Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and viewers. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, I am your political host, Will Wright, and joined by your faithful host, Pastor Josh Bertram. How's it going, Josh?
Blessings, my son. I'm doing okay.
Good. And this week we have Billy Corben, who's somebody I've been really excited to talk to because he's out with a new documentary called God Forbid, the sex scandal that brought down a dynasty. It's on HULU now. He's also the director of some other films that you may be familiar with, like the Cocaine Cowboys, The Kings of Miami, which is on Netflix. So we're really happy to have Billy. So, hey, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I gotta tell you, Billy, like, so I found out about this documentary from Anthea Butler, who you had in your documentary, and the day it came out, I wouldn't be surprised if I was one of the first people to watch it, because I had it favorited and I was waiting for it to come out, and I was just completely blown away. So I'd love to kind of figure out like what inspired you to make a movie about a sex scandal involving the president of the largest Christian college in the world. And maybe the answer's in the question. I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, the answer is not in the question. It's because there's always a Miami connection. That's actually the reason why. Our genre of documentary, if you'll pardon the term, we call Florida fuckery. Because we are, my producing partners and I are all native Floridians, lifelong Miamians, and we've learned through our lifetimes that the Florida of today is the America of tomorrow. Lo siento, I'm sorry, America, to be the one to inform you of that, but it seems to prove true generation after generation. If you want to know what challenges we'll face or calamities will befall us as a nation in the years or even decades to come, you need only look at Florida, particularly South Florida, which T.D. Ullman in Miami City of the Future called America's canary in the coal mine, the bellwether. And so our company is out of Miami. And in fact, our office on Miami Beach is 8 blocks away from a lovely piece of property at 810 Alton Road. And it was this piece of property that really blew the lid off this whole scandal, because in a 2018 BuzzFeed article by Aram Roston, now of Reuters, he wrote about an unusual legal dispute happening in Miami-Dade courts over this piece of property, this $4.65 million commercial real estate property, which housed a liquor store, a very popular Italian restaurant, and what Politico described as, quote, a gay-friendly flop house, end quote, a youth hostel on the roof. And here's the thing. The property was owned by the Falwell family, Jerry Jr.'s wife, Becky, their eldest son, Jerry Falwell III, also known as Trey, and their third partner, who owned 24.9% of this multi-million-dollar piece of property, was Giancarlo Granda, a kid from the suburbs of Miami-Dade, who the Falwells, Jerry Jr. and Becky, met while vacationing in Miami Beach, and he was working as a pool boy, a pool attendant at the luxurious Fontainebleau Resort for a year while he was putting himself through college. And everybody asked the most obvious question, which is, what on earth are the Falwells of Liberty University doing owning this piece of property with a pool boy they met 11 months earlier? And thus launched the scandal that ultimately inspired us to tell this story.
That's amazing. And I think one of the things I really enjoyed about the documentary was it was very creative. Like even like some of the
is that a compliment? I'm not sure. You were grasping for adjectives, and you landed on that. Okay.
Well, so what I want to qualify the creative part by that there's certain parts of the documentary where people are like lip syncing, and it's like, you hear Giancarlo's voice, but like the mouth of like the actress that was playing Becky was moving, and it was very reminiscent of like Drunk History, and I just,
there's a lot of commonalities here with Drunk History story. I find, particularly the drunk part, and certainly the history part as well. But yeah, no, I mean, listen, we were, when you're a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker especially, we kind of straddle the line between journalism and entertainment. Our obligation is always to the truth and to following the facts.
Right,
but we also
right.
have an obligation to our audience to make it I'm sure the pastor can tell you this is part of the game. You have to stay engaging and keep your audience involved and paying attention from the beginning to the end. And so that was the moment where there's a lot of B-roll, a lot of wonderful footage from Liberty University and News Archive, and certainly some beautiful drone shots of Miami. But a lot of this story takes place, of course, in bedrooms, at the pool of the Fontainebleau and in hotel rooms. And so we needed to find a way to visually depict that in an aesthetic that would be compelling to the audience. And also, we kind of go on quite a journey on this doc. We go from like Zalman King to Ken Burns. It goes from from Red Shoe Diaries to Civil War. So it's like you have to, the beginning is a little more what we call our genre pop docs. So like it's a little bit pulpier and more pop culture oriented, and then it evolves. It becomes, I think, a little more serious.
Yeah, and I learned a word in the documentary that I've heard before, but I don't use it very often, and that's the word cuck. And kind of in my before
Watch your mouth, Will. Watch your mouth.
In my before show research, I Googled like what does the word cuck mean, and I swear,
don't do it, Will. Trust me. I did it in like 2015 or 2016. Don't do it.
And don't go to images, dude. Do not click on images.
No, or videos. Don't click videos either.
Well, the one definition I landed on, which ultimately I found in Urban Dictionary, which I know is like, gonna like
extremely tested and peer reviewed and accurate.
Yes.
I know where you're going with this, because there was a rough cut of the documentary that contained this definition.
And so it says a cuckold, or cuck for short, is a person who finds sexual pleasure in their partner having intercourse with people that are not him. So is that the definition you think best describes Jerry Falwell in your documentary?
Poor Pastor Josh. He had no idea what he was getting himself into.
Oh, no. Please, bring it out.
So this is certainly what Giancarlo Granda alleges, that the nature, that when he was working at the pool, and these were sort of the blanks that the blogosphere and the Twitterverse started to fill in when that first pool attendant story came out, because there was a lot of conjecture and a lot of insinuation, but nothing really concrete. And Giancarlo wouldn't break his silence for another 2 years, and the Falwells certainly weren't talking. So everybody started saying, well, what is the true nature of this relationship? And as Giancarlo now tells it, that he was at the pool. Becky Falwell, who he described as a cougar, was in a bikini on one of the poolside beds that they had, these big, like, kind of circular cushion beds they had poolside at the Fontainebleau. It's a very Vegas-esque kind of an environment. Parties, drinks, DJs, live acts. It's very festive. And so she was taking pictures of him with her cell phone. Little did he know she was actually sending those pictures, texting them to her husband upstairs in the hotel suite. And she starts flirting with him and ultimately propositions him, saying, when your shift's over, you'll want to come back to my hotel room. And he says, sure. And the way he tells it is Becky said to him, one thing though, my husband likes to watch. And so this was not, he had no idea, by the way, who these people were. This was just a cougar and her wild, kind of swinger husband or whatever. In fact, Becky told him, he claims, that the night before they had gone to a place called Miami Velvet, which is Roger Stone's favorite swinger club in Miami. And they didn't like the scene. It was too public, and they were looking for a more private arrangement, and hence this proposition. And so what began there, according to Giancarlo, is a kind of 7-year, cuckold threesome turned real estate partnership turned bringing him into their like family and their fold and their inner circle of the most powerful people in the world, and this kind of butterfly effect story where this cuckold thrupling in Miami, a butterfly flaps its wings and changes the course of history, that this cuckold thrupling at a Miami Beach pool may have impacted the outcome of the last two presidential elections. And so that's what really got us interested, is that there's a micro macro kind of story here, almost a Trojan horse, where it's like you can tempt the audience with the candy and then slide some broccoli in there along the way.
Oh, dude, I love that. So I remember we do like a phone call every Monday night, like me and some of the guys from the church, and Will's part of that with me, and we talk about all sorts of stuff. And I remember when the infamous picture with Jerry Falwell Jr. with his pants unbuttoned or whatever that went on Instagram, and we were like, "What is that?" Like, and I'm like, "Man, I don't think he posted that on purpose, dude. I think that was a mistake."
No, he did it on purpose. He did it on purpose. And then he
come to find out.
On purpose. Yeah.
I mean, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And then all this story breaking out, and then finally, like seeing, like, I mean, this Giancarlo Granda and this story coming out. And what did you have any concerns or how did you handle anything like in terms of the credibility of Giancarlo? Now, again, I'm not implying that there isn't. It sounds like there is, but I'm just wondering, how did you handle that? How did that process with him?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've spent about 2 years talking to Giancarlo. He first reached out to us in June of 2020 via email to see if we wanted to tell this story and make this documentary. And it took quite a few months. That was in the thick of the pandemic. Quite a few months to just first get together with him, and then ultimately make the decision to move forward and shoot the interviews, which were 4 days over like a year. But during that entire time, I mean, from the moment he first reached out straight through like this last summer when we were finishing the movie for release, we were demanding corroboration, and we were following up, and we were looking for all of the evidence we could to support, his telling of the story. And so he provided copious amounts of text messages, many multitudes of what you see sampled in the documentary. He provided photographs, he provided emails, he provided contracts, he provided video, some of which is excerpted in the documentary. I went and found wedding video because Giancarlo claimed that he attended the weddings of both of the Falwell's sons. And so we went and after the video and found him in the video. He's sitting in the back row of the pews at the chapel during one wedding. He was sitting back to back with Becky Falwell at the very next table, back to back with her at the reception. So, things just started to add up. Everything he told us, we said we need something. We looked at affidavits that Jerry Falwell Jr. filed under oath in the court proceedings in Miami. In fact, some of the facts were corroborated by the Falwells themselves through various media outlets and that affidavit, for example.
Dude, that's amazing, dude. I just love hearing the inside scoop, as to how, people like method is really like important to me. Like, how do you look at this stuff? What do you ask for? What are you doing? Because obviously you can't just publish something that you don't have, or you're not supposed to, you don't have evidence for. And so it's really cool to hear that. I'm a documentary filmmaker. People lie to me all the time. People lie to me all the time. And so I'm a sort of a natural born skeptic, and, that's good.
And I believe what I can see, and I believe what evidence and experience and experimentation will show me and reveal.
Yes.
The proof is in the pudding, and so I need to see results. I need to see tangible evidence to I'm not just going to take your word for it,
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like that a journalism axiom, which is if your mother tells you that she loves you, make sure you check the sources. You always have to make sure that
I live in
make
Miami.
sure it's quality.
if somebody tells me the sky is blue, I'm gonna open the window and take a look outside. You better believe
Make
it.
sure.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting, like, thinking about this story, right? Because obviously, like, I'm just imagining myself having. Now, again, I would never do this.
Which part?
Put that out.
Which part would you never do?
Many things. Anything that I say on this podcast cannot be held against me in a court of law or anything else.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I'm trying to imagine myself in this scenario on either side, like being propositioned or being the one going and saying, like, hey, you want to come and, I'm going to watch you while you sleep with my wife. And
not my kink. By the way, nobody's trying to kink shame the Falwells either. I mean, whatever you're into, whatever whatever you need in your marriage that you decide together. And also, this guy was 20 years old at the time. He was a consenting adult. He might have there might have been a significant power disparity. He might have thought he knew what he was getting himself into and then found himself over his head. In fact, I call this documentary, it's like the movie Get Out meets The Righteous Gemstones. That's like John, he gets like sort of honey trapped into this world and then is like, is intoxicated by it, at his own words, his own description. And then suddenly realizes, like, maybe this is not, all that glitters is not gold, and this holier than thou hypocrisy may be dangerous for me and liberty and the country. Here's getting back to cuck for a moment. This cuckold, because this is the kink. The kink is allegedly this cuckolding. By the way, come to Miami, spend money, come to a club, drink, have safe sex with consenting adults. That's what Miami is here for. I encourage it. But then don't go back to Lynchburg and fine students and fire faculty and suspend people for doing exactly what it is that you're doing. I mean, they thought the 10 Commandments were like a bucket list here in Miami, the Falwells did. So, I just think that's where Giancarlo started to have, through the years, some conflict. At the beginning, he didn't actually see them as hypocrites. He told me, he goes, because they weren't religious leaders to me. They weren't proselytizing to me. They weren't preaching to me. They were the party couple, that I knew in Miami. We went out to nightclubs, we drank, we had sex. So it's like he didn't see it that way. But I looked up about 2015. It was the election cycle when it seemed that by and large conservatives on social media started weaponizing this word cuck to describe libtards and to go after people on the left who they saw as soft or woke or whatever. And so I didn't actually know what it meant, but I was called one on the Twitter machine. So I made the same terrible mistake that Will did. I opened a browser, a new tab in my browser, and I went to urbandictionary.com, or I went to Google and I said, "What's a cuck?" And then I saw what it was, and then I'm just like, wait a second. Why do you know what this means? Like, you're the one who what? Like, this is not my thing. Like you're the one who knows. Like, this seems to say a
I've
lot
never
more
even
about
heard
you
of it
than
before.
It does about me. Yeah, like, what are you going on about? But yeah, we interviewed Giancarlo's older sister in the documentary, which is a weird thing, and believe me, it's weirdest of all for her.
Yeah.
It took her like 8 months to decide whether or not she wanted to do this. And I did not push her because when she said funny, I was like, I don't blame you. Like, what older sister wants to come on camera and talk about your little brother's sex life? It's like a really awkward thing.
It's very awkward.
But she was like the voice of reason through all of this, because she was the one calling him out. Like, what the heck are you doing? This is stupid. Don't do this. Like, she was the voice of the audience, the voice of reason. So that I thought was really helpful, like sort of understanding the situation and understanding that Giancarlo was making decisions with his other head. Or as he puts it, I was a horny 20-year-old,
Yeah. Well, I mean, like,
so much
she was also in some of those pictures, though, I thought. Like,
we cut a lot. So they hung out with the Falwells, brought Giancarlo into their family. They treated him as another son. He was friends with their adult sons and daughter. He would go to the ranch at Lynchburg and stay in their guest house and have sex with Becky there. Obviously without the kids knowing. When Giancarlo occasionally was dating girls his own age, he would take them to visit the Falwells. The Falwells befriended the girlfriends, would text them. One of them was pre-med, and they invited them to move to Lynchburg. They would get her an internship at a hospital, and Giancarlo could work at Liberty. Wow. And then and they befriended the parents. They sent Giancarlo's mother a Christmas gift every single year. They went to dinner with them. You see pictures of this. We don't really get into it, but they went to dinner with them at the Italian restaurant on the property that they, their tenant on the property that they own. And like, they were really, and his parents, he says this in the doc, thought that this was just a good Christian family that was helping their son get a leg up in business. And in their first transaction, the first business transaction anyway. Giancarlo was effectively a real estate millionaire. Less than 11 months after meeting these folks.
Wow, that's unbelievable. And I guess what I'm thinking is like imagining myself even where I would get like even the gumption, or I'm trying to think of the word to even say this. My question is, did you find any evidence that this was the first time, or that this was not the first time something like this had happened? I mean, what do you think? I'll let you speak on
not to dodge the question, but I want to say I've been doing a lot of interviews about this documentary, and this is the first time the term gumption has come up, and I want to say I'm surprised that it is. It's a very good. I like in Miami we call it cojones, I guess, right? It's sort of the same,
yeah, I could have said that. I decided I'd be the pastor and not say that.
Fair enough. No, but so I will say, we were not satisfied with the corroboration we were able to get, but I will tell you that after Becky Falwell left the Fontainebleau, checked out on that particular vacation in the spring of 2012, she went to TripAdvisor and gave Giancarlo a very good review for helping make up her bed at the pool. And so it turns out Becky was a rather prolific TripAdvisor reviewer. And there are other hotels and other resorts in Miami Beach, in the Bahamas, where she complimented other employees by name. And, considering Giancarlo's story and her name checking and complimenting him in her review, there are other leads to follow up. Let me just put it to you that way. And ultimately, when Giancarlo came forward for the first time in late August of 2020, when Aaron Roston's Reuters story dropped, Politico within days had a bombshell article about a former bandmate and Liberty University student, a former bandmate of Trey, of their oldest son. He was a Liberty University student, I believe, at the time. This boy was like the drummer or something of the band, and he had crashed at the Falwells' guest house one night and claims that he awoke to Becky Falwell filleting him. I mean, performing oral sex on him. He told her no. She kind of shushed him down, and then pursued him via text, and in what Giancarlo describes as a similar way or a similar manner to that which she pursued him, with sort of like love notes, love songs, daily affirmations, memes about love and devotion, and then getting him gifts and things. And so so there is certainly documentation of at least this one other man or young adult, and there may be others. We don't know.
Wow. So just for the record, in the event my wife listens or watches this episode, she doesn't watch all of them. So
I hope she doesn't watch this one.
Yeah. I just want to say that
I hope my mother doesn't watch this one. That's what I'm saying.
It's like I just want to reassure my wife and family that the reviews that I currently have on this podcast, I have no relationship with them whatsoever. So I just want to make sure that I'm establishing that fact on air,
yes.
And it's recorded.
But
for all
here's
eternity.
the deal. Let me just make this point. Like, there is absolutely no way. Yeah. Okay. And let me take that back. It seems improbable to me that could have been the first time something like this could have happened. And that's all I'll say. I mean, how could, anyway, Go ahead, Will.
Yeah. So, there were a couple of like unexpected characters that showed up in the documentary, and one of which was Roseanne Barr's ex-husband. And I'm curious if you can maybe talk about that and how is he connected to this whole thing?
Tom Arnold at the time was on a crusade against Donald Trump. He was very public and vocal about it. He had this series on Vice, the cable network, called The Hunt for the Trump Tapes. You'll recall, I think he was on like Celebrity Apprentice, and he had claimed that Mark Burnett, the executive producer of that show, was sitting on an absolute mountain of incriminating outtakes from that program of Donald Trump just saying horrifically racist, homophobic, misogynistic, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic things, which I'm clutching my pearls right now. I'm shocked, shocked that such video would exist anywhere. But nonetheless, Tom was very vocal about this crusade. It never turned up anything, but obviously, like, I wasn't like, we need to interview for this documentary. It was Tom Arnold. Like, what a bizarre thing. And in fact, one of our other interview subjects calls it out. Mark Ebner says like, why the hell is Tom Arnold involved in this? Why is this happening? Like, that's how we kind of introduce him into the documentary. And it's because he wound up talking with people who had been kind of excommunicated from Trump world at that point, including Donald Trump's former attorney and fixer. And they, he after he was sort of, indicted and kind of turned state's evidence, if you will, and testified before Congress, Tom Arnold reached out to Michael Cohen and recorded several conversations that they had, one of which was about how Jerry Falwell Jr. came to be the first evangelical leader to endorse Donald Trump, this twice divorced Democrat abortionist playboy from New York City, might as well be Sodom and Gomorrah, and a man with 5 children from 3 different women, and like very much outside the profile of what you would expect an evangelical candidate to be, particularly in a primary with Ted Cruz, who is in fact an evangelical whose father is a pastor, who chose to announce in 2015 his own presidential campaign for 2016 at Convocation at Liberty University in the Liberty Flames arena, in front of an audience of 10,000. So he thought he had the Jerry Falwell Jr. endorsement in the bag. He thought he had the evangelical vote in the bag. And it turned out that Jerry Falwell Jr. really kicked down the door and rolled out the red carpet in that very passionate and powerful voting bloc for Donald Trump instead. And so in trying to get to the bottom of that, or explaining the origin stories of that, Michael Cohen had a very interesting tale to tell. And he told it first to, of all people, Michael Cohen.
Yeah.
I mean,
were they friends?
Tom Arnold. Yeah.
Like were they friends like prior? Did they have a relationship?
No, I think it's hard when you live your whole life in a very specific circle and then you get excommunicated, from that circle. When you become a pariah in your world, like Michael Cohen did, I don't think you have a lot of friends anymore, and so he found like this new set of friends and fans amongst the resistance, and I don't know. I mean, I guess he called his podcast Mea Culpa for a reason, but he's certainly, Michael Cohen is certainly a colorful character. I spoke with him on the phone. He declined to go on camera, and he kind of has backed off his story a little bit, because what the story he originally told in his book, he has these 2 dots, right? He has this favor he did for Jerry Falwell Jr., which I'll explain in a moment, and then he has him calling up Jerry Falwell Jr. to endorse the boss, as he calls him, the boss.
The boss.
And so Michael Cohen in his book draws a straight line between those 2 points. Now he's kind of like backed off from that and said, like, no, these 2 things did happen in that order, but it wasn't a quid pro quo. It wasn't I scratch your back, you scratch mine. It was just coincidental or unrelated. And I think he did that because once Jerry and Becky got excommunicated and they too were pariahs, I find that a lot of pariahs kind of meet each other on the outs again, because they become friends again because they're now on the outs together, and they have kind of common ground in that way. But long story even longer, what happened is that when this legal dispute erupted in Miami, as I said, like the reason any of us know about this in the first place is that Giancarlo Granda had brought in some buddies of his who he believed to be sophisticated real estate operators who turned out to be perhaps a little less so. And
the Fernandez, right?
The Fernandez, junior and senior, yes, father and son. And they initially sort of helped them scout out some potential properties. They had a falling out. And the Fernandezes later claimed that they were promised a piece of this action, a piece of this property, and they were screwed out of it in this deal. And so they threatened to sue in Miami-Dade County, and they claimed that once we file this lawsuit and it becomes a public record, not only are we going to sue over this real estate venture, but we're going to have to reveal the true nature of the relationship between Giancarlo Granda and the Falwells. And they claimed that they had photographic evidence, compromising photos that would prove that this relationship was more than just this real estate partnership. And so they seem to be presenting that in a way to say, or to incentivize the Falwells to settle this matter and write a check and make them go away. Instead, Jerry Falwell Jr. calls up his buddy, Michael Cohen, fixer in Trump world, a friend of his since a 2012 convocation in which a pre-presidential Donald Trump appeared. And Giancarlo Granda, in fact, was VIP in attendance and met Donald Trump there. got his copy of Art of the Deal autographed. In fact, he was a big fan at the time. And so he calls up Michael Cohen and he says, "Can you help us with this?" And Michael Cohen made a couple calls, and to his credit, he fixed it as a fixer should. He made these guys go away for several years anyway, and those photos never saw the light of day. But where the photos did go was to Michael Cohen. So Michael Cohen was now in possession of the compromat that the Fernandezes had originally attempted to use as leverage in their settlement demand. How
did the Fernandez get their hands on the pictures in the first place? Do you know?
I don't know, and that's in fact why I asked Giancarlo up, down, left, right, and sideways about it. He gives us his answer in the documentary, which is that he doesn't know. And there's only a finite number of ways they could have gotten them. But Giancarlo does admit, to his credit, that those were all photos that he was in possession of. So how they go from Giancarlo to the Fernandezes is really the question. And we were not able to get a satisfactory answer to that we were able to corroborate and then publish in the doc.
So you had mentioned, obviously this convocation at Liberty, you've mentioned it a few times, where Ted Cruz made his announcement that he's running campaign. And this seems to be, or like the Falwells put their support behind someone. Can you help us understand the significance of the convocation at Liberty, even for people that don't quite understand, even like what Liberty, I mean, obviously it's a college, but how did Liberty get to where it is so significant politically, especially with it being such a clearly religious evangelical institution? Why is it so significant to be at the convocation? What does Liberty itself play as a part of this?
I want to start by saying that this is not a documentary about Christians and Christianity. This is a documentary about people who exploit Christians and Christianity for power.
That's good.
And profit,
That's good.
Power and profit, and they do so by using the pulpit. That's what and that's what they do. And in many ways, and Giancarlo saw it this way as well. The Liberty University community, students, faculty, alumni, they were collateral damage, victims of this scandal, because it brought a great deal of embarrassment. It arguably diminished the quality of the education, the reputation of the institution, the value of their diploma, and that's not fair.
Sure.
Many.
Totally.
Many of them are true believers in both.
I love Liberty as an institution. I've used anyway. Yeah, but I really
it's a gorgeous campus, and there's people whose parents send them there to be educated with within the confines of their faith, and who are true believers in both the Gospels and what they believed the mission of that institution was. And there was clearly a disparity between that community and the leadership of the university, particularly under Jerry Falwell Jr. I think it's important, to start there, because this is not an attack on on Liberty University. I don't think it's particularly an attack on anybody. I know some people disagree.
Sure.
But convocation is an interesting event. There's compulsory attendance if you live on campus. As I said, it's in the Liberty Flames basketball arena, seats about 10,000 people. It's 3 times a week. Many times it is just a chapel. It is, it's bands, it's preaching, it's what you'd expect at a Christian university,
Right.
But that means the convocation, of course, takes on, it has that veneer of religiosity. It says that what you are hearing here are the Gospels. What you are hearing here is the fact according to God, and therein lies the problem. Because what you see in the cynicism here is you see people attempting to replace God and replace religion with false idols, with their own ideology and their own pursuit of power and profit. And so what starts to happen is you have a lot of politicians who come in, particularly conservative politicians running for office, particularly in a national office. You've seen through the years, and this all starts with really Jerry Falwell Sr., who was labeled a kingmaker for his influence in electing Ronald Reagan. And that carried all the way through to Jerry Jr., who after the election of Donald Trump, and he was sort of branded and seen as a power player, a political power player and kingmaker. Convocation became OAN. It became Newsmax. It became what Jerry Jr. himself described to Judge Jeanine as the Fox News of universities. And it became a mouthpiece for the Trump, not only the Trump administration, but kind of the grifters in his orbit, everybody who was looking to profit from their affiliation with Trump and the administration. And so everybody went there. Everybody went there to sell their books. And again, students who were required to attend some of them started to become resentful at what they perceived as the political indoctrination when they were there for a religious, education and experience. Right, and they started becoming cynical about the entire operation and demanding reform.
Yeah, I think one of the best things I loved about your film is the way that you threaded that needle between sort of the rise of the religious right and just the effects that it can have on our society. And I think you finished up the documentary talking just briefly about January 6th. As a podcast that focuses exclusively kind of on that middle point between religion and politics, it's one of the reasons why I was eager to watch it and have been telling people that they need and should watch it.
Thank you.
I'm curious on your thoughts about the continuation of this movement. I mean, you spent a lot of time, looking at the stuff, maybe in ways that you've never done before. And for us, we see, or at least I see personally, like this crescendo of Christian nationalism happening in our country. I mean, you got 70% of people in the faith community supporting Herschel Walker, over an actual pastor,
we should put women in prison for getting abortions, but the men who pay for them should go to the U.S. Senate. That seems
exactly.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to be able to get an abortion in this country is if you were Herschel Walker's girlfriend.
That's the cynicism of this that I find troubling. I'm not a religious man, spoiler alert. But as I said earlier, I believe what I can prove and what I see with my own eyes, what I have evidence of.
Sure.
I've seen faith save people. Full stop. I've seen it happen. It doesn't require my belief or my faith for me to say that I've seen faith turn drug addicts and alcoholics into good fathers and homeowners and contributing members of society. I've seen faith turn murderers into virtual saints. I've seen it. So again, I can prove it because I the proof is again in the pudding. I don't have to be a believer to see that is a thing.
Sure.
And that is fine. I don't, if what you believe makes you a better person, a better spouse, a better parent, a better American, a better human, literally, God bless. like I love it. I want to be on a planet with good humans and good parents and good people.
Yeah.
Whatever your journey is, whatever your belief is, however you get there. But then don't judge me and my beliefs or lack thereof. As the famous jurist said, your right to wave your hands around ends where my nose begins. And don't impose your views and your faith and on me or on our government, because that flies in the face of what our founding fathers, truly believed in. Government shouldn't be in religion, and religion shouldn't be in government. Okay, that's that. Full stop. I mean, anyone who tells you different is perverting the founding documents and the intent of our founding fathers. And that said, I think when you look at the cynicism of the rise in the religious right, the conventional wisdom, Randall Balmer, an evangelical pastor that we interviewed in the documentary, who wrote a sensational 2014 Politico piece called The Real Origins of the Religious Right, who kind of turns this idea on its head, that the conventional wisdom that it was Roe versus Wade that mobilized evangelicals into politics. It really wasn't. The Catholics, to their credit, were right on that issue. That was considered a Catholic issue, and they believed that, and they fought and they pushed back against it. Evangelicals, on the other hand, to say there was dissent is being conservative, pun intended, because their values and ideology was more consistent with small government. The government has no place in this decision. This belongs to a woman, her doctor, her family, her faith. And we don't want the government infringing upon our rights as Christians, and we don't want a big government involved in those decisions. But that wasn't good enough for people like Jerry Falwell Sr., who was looking to raise more revenue and was looking to control more people and become a political force. Because he didn't like desegregation. He wanted to. He started a segregation academy so that white students would not have to coexist with black students. He had his he and many other people who headed segregation academies and opened them had their tax exempt status threatened by the IRS, who said you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be tax exempt and be racist and discriminate. Yeah. Pick one or the other. And none of these issues were working publicly. They weren't winning. Racism didn't sell. This whole IRS tax thing, nobody was buying into this. So they needed issues. And so what Falwell Sr. did was tap into the culture wars of the 1970s. He railed against the Equal Protection Amendment and against women's rights and feminism. He railed against divorce, against pornography, the famous People versus Larry Flint storyline. He railed against gay rights, and in fact had his first taste of political success in Miami-Dade County, where he fought alongside Anita Bryant in 1977 to overturn Miami-Dade's gay rights ordinance. It was the first equal rights protection, local ordinance for gays and lesbians in the South. And they successfully got it overturned. But again, these weren't really set. The 1970s was sort of was the liberalization of America, the diversification of America. And they needed something a little bit sexier. And then in 1978, something happened. And this anti-abortion movement that the Catholics had really championed helped elect like 4 or 5 United States senators, Republicans who were very much the underdogs against pro-choice Democrats. They kicked their asses. And then Paul Weyrich, a GOP conservative mover and shaker, really a political guy, and more so than a religious guy. He ultimately co-founded the Moral Majority with Jerry Falwell Sr., and he said, this is the demagoguery we need. Branding people baby killers is a winning issue amongst, to just inflame the passions of our flock and get them to vote the way we tell them to vote from the pulpit. And it was not pro-life. It was pro-power. And as Paul Weyrich famously said on audio, on a secret audio recording in 1980, quote, "Now many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome, good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down." So he said the quiet part out loud, and that is still the tactic today, 42 years later.
Is it? I read that in Anthea Butler's White Evangelical Racism, which is a phenomenal book, and I mean she was on our program just a couple weeks ago. But that's awesome. Go ahead, Josh. I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's so cool. And I just want to take a step back for a moment and talk about process for a second, because you mentioned a lot of different film and different recordings, and obviously, like I'm doing school. I'm in a doctoral program right now, and the research where you get so much, you have way too much than you can use. And that's the point, right? So you got to write within a certain limit, and you got to have, I'm sure they give you some kind of time limit or something that you have to work. So
what they say, Pastor Josh, write drunk, edit sober. That's what they say. So
there you go. I guess my question is,
I see where you're going.
Yeah, what's your process? What's the process?
I told you we had 4 days of interviews in total with Giancarlo. I mean, that's an extraordinary amount of material on that one interview alone. Add to that all the hours of convocation, footage and the news B-roll and a lot of story we wanted to tell. A lot of documentaries these days, as you know, are multi-parters. They could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 parts, and we probably could have very easily done that here. But yes, there was a time limit. Yeah. And when you have basically a featured doc runtime, which in this case about an hour and 48 minutes before the credits, you don't have a lot of time to tell necessarily both the micro and the macro that we're trying to tell. So you have to be very economical about it, and you have to be very efficient about it. But that's a good challenge. I always say limitations breed creativity. If you have unlimited sort of time and resources, whatever, you'll just, as my producing partner Alfred Spellman always says, the amount of work you have to do will expand or contrast based on the amount of time you have to do it. No matter, anybody in school now, like when you're cramming the night before to get a paper done or an assignment done, it never changes. You're going to do that your whole life. You're never going to be done with like ample time, to chill and kick back and relax and turn the thing in.
Yes.
It ends with an all-nighter, So there's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of trial and error because, our timeline, our chronology here is not, chronological. It is slightly, experimental. There are flashbacks, there are flash forwards, and you want to achieve those without making the audience feel like, oh no, we're coming to a screeching halt here and, going back in time and it's going to get confusing. And, so you have to do it also in an aesthetically compelling way. And to be perfectly honest, the lawyers come in as well and make decisions, and make creative decisions effectively that we then have to smooth over so it doesn't appear like the movie has been lawyered. But obviously they are they are a presence physically and otherwise in the not physically but otherwise in the editing.
Yes.
They're very much the Jedi ghost of lawyers is always dwelling there in the background.
You don't have enough evidence to say that. You can't say that.
And we have to make sure to be objective and fair. And listen, we all exist in our own media silos right now. We are in my company. We're constantly playing devil's advocate and arguing back and forth with each other. If we do this, we have to do this. If we say this, we have to say that. And you want to make sure you're stepping outside your echo chamber and ensuring there's no confirmation bias, that we are presenting, the objective truth to the best of our ability.
With everything you just said, I'm curious, and feel free to not answer this question if you can't. But like, was there some footage or a story that you really wanted to tell, either because it was really interesting, salacious, whatever, but you didn't have enough time to either one, fully investigate it, or two, just not enough time within sort of the boundaries of your film. Like,
Yes.
what are those stories? Awesome. Great. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see.
I mean, that's all I can say. I'm not going to bring, if I could repeat them here, we would have put them in the doc. But I will say, no, I will say there have been stories reported already publicly and published that I would have liked to have included if we had the time, but we had to obviously try to focus on our micro and macro. And if the details didn't sort of support either of those buckets, then we had to obviously cut it for time. But there's some interesting stories about out there already in the media about the Falwells having used real estate, because Jerry Jr. is by training and trade a real estate attorney, a very successful one by all accounts, an impressive portfolio in and around the Lynchburg area. There's a quote from a Liberty student in a Politico story that says, "We're not a university, we are a real estate hedge fund," is really what we are. And Jerry Jr. helped make a lot of people in that area very, very rich through real estate, through construction. He did about $100 million in capital, campaigns and improvements on that. It's a beautiful facility. I mean, the campus, Giancarlo says it himself, it's the most beautiful college campus he's ever seen. I mean, everything is like new and state of the art. And that's all Jerry Jr., helping to grow that university into the powerhouse that it is, into a multi-billion-dollar, endowment. There's stories about, let's say, their generosity to, say, other young men in and around Virginia who got the benefit of quote unquote sweetheart deals on property that the Falwells controlled through Liberty University. And I don't want to say anymore, but like there's other stories that I thought would have been very interesting that would have helped kind of to support the storytelling in God Forbid, but that we just didn't have. It was just too far afield, and we just didn't have time for it.
Yeah. So I just have two more questions. The first is like, what has been sort of the overall reception of the film? I mean, like I know I loved it. And I know Josh loved it, but I can only imagine that it. Yeah. So.
Well, in these very divisive times, it is divisive. I will say that by and large, it has been favorable from multiple ideological spheres. I think the Falwells, like I said, there was collateral damage in that scandal. People who were Falwell believers at one point, and so they don't have like a big constituency anymore, and so a lot of people felt betrayed by them personally and spiritually and economically and otherwise. So there's been a lot of positive. Then of course there's the corner who thinks I'm a libtard cuck. And then I'm like, am I the cuck? Really? Is that who the cuck is here? I mean, of all people in this situation, you're going to call me like, by the way, not that there's anything wrong with that, just not my kink,
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, it is, people have complained, like, how do we draw that straight line to January 6th and the Dobbs decision? Again, fair point if you want to criticize the storytelling or the journalism. I accept that. To me, I think it's clear. I think to some and to a lot of people, it seems to be clear. But let's face it, documentary to some extent is a Rorschach. We open up lots of many cans of worms along the way, and people bring their own experience and wisdom and baggage to the table and start to focus on different things. Sometimes they relate to certain things. Sometimes they're repulsed by certain things. Sometimes they are, sometimes they are going to reject certain things. And I think that's fair. But I also think if we're going to talk about how the evangelical community, to the tune of about 80% of their voters, helped uplift Donald Trump into the presidency, we have to follow it to its obvious conclusion, which was the end of his presidency, which ended with an extraordinarily disturbing and historic, violent act in which the flag of treasonous traitors who tried to overthrow this country, the Confederate flag, flew for the first time in our nation's capital, in the People's House, in a terribly violent act in which the majority of people we interviewed in the documentary are Christians, one of whom is, I mentioned, an evangelical pastor, which they found very unchristian-like, but yet there, all over that crowd, was Christian iconography, were crosses, were statues, was the Virgin Mary, were images of Jesus himself in MAGA regalia, religious leaders leading prayers, the QAnon shaman breaking into the house and on the dais, leading his compatriots in a prayer so that God would help assist in a violent insurrection and overturning of a free and fair election in this country. And so I say, how is that not related to the story we're telling, and very much like I talked about the origins of evangelical political activism through this very cynical, Jerry Falwell Sr. did not preach his first sermon against abortion for 5 or 6 years after Roe v. Wade, until after he saw that this is where the power and the money would be. And to his credit, he was right. And his son carried on that tradition in a 40-plus year, multi-generational evangelical dynasty that not only had outsized influence on presidential politics, but did ultimately succeed in what they claimed their mission was, which was to overturn Roe v. Wade. And I happened to be in Washington, D.C., interviewing Megan K. Stack, who profiled the Falwells after the scandal, who spent a lot of time with them, talked to us in detail about their relationship and their marriage as it exists today in the documentary. That day, while we were sitting there in the middle of that documentary, the Dobbs decision was officially released. And I walked about 15, 20 minutes from that interview to the court and took some of those photographs that you see at the end of the documentary there. And I will say, in a peculiar postscript that is not in the documentary, so you get some up-to-date info, because we didn't know where it would stand. We didn't know where it would stand as of publication time, so we didn't include this title card. But as we sit here today talking, gentlemen, Jerry Falwell Jr., his family, and Giancarlo Granda are still partners in that real estate venture. So the pie chart that you see in the documentary, animated, breaking down the ownership, they're all still in bed together, if you will.
Unintended.
Becky Falwell owns 50.1%. Jerry Falwell III, owns 25%, and Giancarlo Granda owns 24.9% of that property right now. Bizarre, but true.
That's so crazy.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I'm not sure how many times you get a documentary idea pitched to you, but I'm going to pitch an idea. Okay.
Shoot your shot, Pastor Josh.
Think about it. I'm going to do it. So, okay. So New Apostolic Reformation. Have you heard of these guys?
No, but I want to hear Donald Trump pronounce it.
Well, okay. All I'm saying is that
the new apostolic of the deliciousness.
It's basically about all the guys that everyone prophesying that Trump would win. These Christians, Pentecostals prophesying, because I'm Pentecostal in my theology, prophesying that Trump would win. It's absolutely fascinating. We've interviewed several people. One guy on the far right, he's not on the far right, but he investigates them. He's a professor, Damon Barry, unbelievable podcast. He knows all about this. He works. Yeah. I mean, it's just really cool. And then we've had Andre Gagné just a few weeks ago. We just released it, and he is an expert on these guys and the political power and the political influence. And I'm just going to pitch it to you It would be absolutely fascinating, and you would find a lot of stuff and a lot of trails and a lot of connections to political stuff. That's my sense.
Yeah. I'll add to that is that I think one of the reasons your film really resonated a lot, especially like within sort of the experts and folks that we talked to on this show, is it's probably the first large scale expose about the Christian nationalism and the tie of the religious right to like the Trump wing of whatever, or the Republican Party at large. Like there just really isn't anything out there that makes that tie. And because we would know, we would have them on the show and we would talk to them, like lots of reporters, lots of experts, lots of people, but like your documentary is the first that's kind of directly tied the two together in a really, really good way. So I second that.
We call what we do synthesis journalism. We see it on the shoulders of you can see through the archive footage of a lot of people who have done extraordinary, contemporaneous shoe leather journalism. But I think it's helpful to have it put together, to sort of take a hypothesis and kind of present it in a package that is, entertaining, but that also puts together the facts and some of this journalism. I will say that I think the Pillow guy says Trump is president right now, right? I mean, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that...
Yeah, I think he's on his like 12.
The prophecies are true.
Yeah.
The prophecies are true. Pastor John.
Yeah, the guys who said they would say, no, we didn't. The prophecy was true. They stole the election.
Right. Isn't there like a date that keeps sliding? The date keeps sliding. There's a date in which Trump is going to be like officially reinstated, right?
Revealed again. Yeah.
This is the rub for me again. Like because I just like again replacing religion with this, replacing religion with politics, replacing religion with false idols, replacing God with strong men. I don't understand it. Like it's not consistent with any of the Christians that I know or that I've ever known, or any of the, it's even after examining it and getting into it and seeing like it's happening, it's a real thing, but I still don't get it. Like it's one, I know where the people on the pulpit are coming from. That's power and profit. I get it, but why? But how do they convince other people that this is consistent with what they, with their faith, with what they believed in, with what they've always been taught is true? And I get called a sheep by the very same people that are in fact a flock and are actually voting exactly the way that they are told by a false idol. It's surreal to me, and it's certainly distressing to me as well, because I don't begrudge people their faith, but I certainly begrudge people being conned. A con person or a con man or a con woman, exploiting people and leading them astray.
Yeah. So I guess last question. What are you working on next? Kind of what's the
nap? Will I could use a nap.
True.
Is what I could use, but no, we are currently in production. We have 7 projects now, but one of which is the 5th title in the Cocaine Cowboys franchise. After Cocaine Cowboys, the Kings of Miami, which is now on Netflix. It's called The Last of the Cocaine Cowboys, in fact, for more reasons than one. And but it's to me, pardon me, if we were going to do that again, it really needed to have some like mic drop access, and we got it. We got Carlos Later, one of the 4 original co-founders of the Medellin cartel, along with Pablo Escobar, Rodrigo Gacha, and Jorge Ochoa. And it's like interviewing Al Capone. It is just, you're hearing history from the man who not only lived the history, but made it happen. I mean, this is not Cocaine Cowboys. Like, this is like the guy, a short of interviewing Pablo Escobar, which we couldn't do without a seance, this is extraordinary. Right. And more, the Cocaine Cowboys documentaries in the past have been somewhat provincial. They've been about Miami or Florida or the United States, but this is about how these guys, these Cocaine Cowboys, turned the Western Hemisphere upside down. And then the United States, like, preposterous reaction with the failed war on drugs, just continued that that spiral, really. And so you had the corruption of Colombia, the Bahamas, Panama, Nicaragua, Cuba, Mexico, and the United States. So it's this very sprawling, international kind of epic as told by this really, really compelling, this pirate at age 70, and you remember Carlos was the guy who was like the real life James Bond villain. He owned an island in the Bahamas. He had the prime minister on his payroll for $2 million a year. So he was and he was considered a bit of a nut too. So we talk about all that craziness with him. We spent about 4 days in Germany. I'm sorry, we spent about a week in Germany with him, and got it all from the horse's mouth. And it was really very, very compelling. And listen, maybe we'll do a God forbid too. I would love to hear from the Falwells. I think they're a really fun, interesting, and complicated, couple. And I mean, Jerry's in the corner right now, watching, me. And, and so I would love to talk. Too late, really. Too real. So, but anyway, I got to tell you, really interesting part of what we do. I always say that the best of our work, or really any good documentary, the best documentaries are just the start of a conversation. Right? They're not all inclusive, but they have enough kind of meat to chew on where it inspires other people to recommend it, to talk about it, to want other people to see it so you can talk about it and debate it with them. And I will say, my best experiences in talking about this have been with people of faith, have been I was on a conservative morning talk show in Virginia, I think it serves in part the Lynchburg market. And I thought it was the most interesting, conversations that I've had about this. Cause I think that's the problem is we're not talking. We're just, we're yelling into the Twitter box or or the Facebook machine, or we're just preaching to the converted, and we're not having conversations as Americans who may have policy disagreements. We may even have different religions, but as John F. Kennedy said, we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal. And so we have to try to find a way to make the best of this time that we have here together. And who wants to do it acrimoniously? Who wants to do it always hating and in fear and yelling and demagoguing? Yeah. It's like, why don't we just, I don't know, dare I say Jesus had the right idea. Why don't we accept each other? Why don't we accept diversity as our strength? Why don't we accept the love of our neighbor and I don't know. I feel like there's a happier, better way of doing this. And I think it starts with conversations like this.
I agree. And as a podcast, being the West Coast liberal and Josh being the MAGA Republican.
Nobody's perfect, Will. Nobody's perfect.
I pray all the time for Josh. But no, hey,
I need it, bro. Big
yeah. Yeah, I bet.
We all need it, Josh. We all need it.
We all need it. But hey, Billy, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Yes,
this was awesome. Thank you for creating the documentary, God forbid. If you haven't seen it, make sure you see it. Just good luck on all your future projects.
Yes. And Christians should watch this documentary because judgment begins in the house of God. That is a quote from Scripture. We gotta be self-critical before we can be critical of others. Anyway, that's all I gotta say.
And the House of Hulu. Shameless plug.
And the House of Hulu,
I have to remind everybody where they can see it now streaming on Hulu,
yes.
Domestically, and I think Disney Plus in some of the international markets as well, or wherever the Hulu content winds up. But I thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for the invitation and the conversation and for covering this story.
All right. Thank you. And we will see all of our viewers and listeners next week. Take care, guys.